There it is, the old warning, recording. All right. In the meantime, let me go here and open. This is the Mac side. Two operating systems, two desktops. I think this, there you go, there's Windows. 767 Axon Summer 2023. That looks like a good file maybe to open up for 2024. All right. So here's an example that I did last year with a different sort of volume. It's not quite as long and skinny as the one that I specified for you guys. It was more of a cube. However, it's more or less the same. You know, you get the gist of it, right? Yeah. Can you guys see my screen just fine? You can hear me okay? All right, perfect. Okay, so there's a couple of things here. One is that I would like for us to talk about how you might go about then producing a set of axon drawings from these. Okay. Now, how many of you know what I mean when I say axonometric or isometric drawing? And David knows. Anna, you probably know, yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Solly, what's that?
I do.
Yeah. So Melanie, an axon looks like this, right? So first of all, we're in perspective mode, right? So this is kind of like how our eyeballs see. Does that make sense? So we sort of see three-dimensionally. And in fact, let me just move this over to this side for a moment. Let me go to properties. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to change the lens length of our camera to about 28 millimeter, which approximates our eyeballs, right? And so one of the things you might notice here, and of course it gets stronger the closer you zoom in, right, is that things that are closer to us look larger, things that are further away look smaller, right? That's perspective. That's classic perspective. And indeed, let me just get out the drawing tools here. Annotate. Where's the toolbar here? Ah, there we are. Oh, beautiful. Okay. I don't know if you can see my blue chicken scratch here. There we go. Yeah. But all of the edges going in one direction appear to be sort of converging way over here off to the side to a vanishing point. And all of the edges over here appear to be converging to a vanishing point, maybe just slightly off my screen here, right? So we call this typically a two-point perspective, right? We can basically create two vanishing points off to either side. The verticals remain vertical. We can then draw everything back to those two vanishing points, right? If you think about the ground is just a grid of that looks like this, right? And again, things get closer, they get bigger. As things get further away, they get smaller and closer to each other, etc. Right? Sort of foreshortening, things like that. All right. So you've probably seen an axon drawing, but didn't really know what it was called or didn't necessarily know. Let me just close that. Oh, no. How do I clear what I've done here? Oof, there we go. Clear all drawings. All right. Okay. So this is perspective view. And of course I can change my perspective, um, literally and figuratively, by simply tumbling with my right mouse button, right? So that's basically just shifting where the horizon line and the vanishing points are relative to my eyeballs. One of the things I can do is I can change my viewport. If I go to, let's say, the viewport label, in this case, perspective, and I go all the way down to an option called set view, you can see that I have a number of options here. One is top, bottom, left, right, front, back, perspective, two-point perspective, and isometric. Isometric and axonometric, there's slight differences. Axons are part of or a subset of the larger isometrics, I think. Don't quote me on that. It's one way or the other. There's slight differences. I don't really care so much about them. I'll just use them interchangeably. Okay. So I've just changed this to an axon. What that means is that instead of all of the edges converging to vanishing points, they actually remain parallel. So oftentimes you'll see this also referred to as a paraline drawing. Okay. And in fact, what you can think of, this is what we would call a 30-30 axonometric. And then if I draw a horizontal line, I look at the angle here, that's 30 degrees. And again, if I measure the edges, these edges to the horizontal, that's also 30 degrees, okay? There's 45, 45, 30, 60, 30, 30, you know, it just kind of depends on the rule that you choose. But these will always remain parallel. And in fact, it's like redrawing the side views to scale, but along that sort of 30-degree skewing, right? So the verticals remain vertical. Everything that's horizontal either goes back in the 30 degrees here or 30 degrees there. And the other thing is that regardless of how close it is to our eyeball, everything remains to scale, right? So in other words, nothing sort of looks larger or smaller depending on its how high or how far away it is. So again, 2-point perspective, we would set up these 2 points. There's our line. And we could draw a cube just like that, right? With axon, we'd be measuring these 2 things, making sure that they remain parallel, measuring these 2, making sure they remain parallel. This is also parallel to this. This is parallel to this, etc., right? And if this was 20 meters and this was 20 meters and this was 30 or feet, 20 feet, 20 feet, 30 feet, then, you know, if we drew another one that was the exact same dimensions, they would remain the exact same size, right? They would always be exactly the same. Whereas in perspective, it would look much smaller because it's further away, right? Okay, so that's the difference. And, you know, I used to make students actually draw these with parallel bars and triangles and things like that. That's why you have 45-degree triangles and 30-60 triangles. However, it's really simple to just generate these things, right? So a couple of things here, right? Again, what I did is I went to the viewport label, clicked on the arrow to bring down a menu again. Here I can say set view, I can say isometric, and then it's a matter of, do I want to look at it from the northeast, which I guess would be looking at it from the positive X, positive Y quadrant direction back at the origin, or the northwest, or southeast, or southwest, right? So suffice to say, I'm going to pick the one that looks the most interesting to me to start off with. Maybe I'll just go with the first one. Let's see, northeast. That one looks interesting. Why not? Okay. Now, another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this label and I'm going to change the viewport settings, right? The viewport from ghosted. Right now I have it set to ghosted. You can see, you can go through these. X-ray just means you see edges. Shaded just is, I think, the default for perspective. It just shades everything with the generic color based off of the layer that the objects are in. I'm going to switch this over to rendered just for a moment. Let's take a look at that. Okay, so by default, rendering will give you some soft shadows, not crisp shadows, but soft shadows, as if you have a diffuse light source. So we don't necessarily see any hard shadows here, right? But we do see tone and texture based off of where edges meet and things like that, and where a diffuse light source might be. Of course, the top edges seem to be the brightest, and then you know, some of these interior surfaces, of course, getting darker and darker and darker. All right. The other thing you'll notice is that everything is sort of turns white. In other words, it's created a generic shader that's a sort of a white plaster material shader. Assigned it to all of the surfaces in this scene and then rendering them out as such. Okay. Which isn't too bad, right? But what we can do, I'll say this, I'll just go through some of these others, right? There's rendered. Remember rendered, because I want to maybe we're going to make our own viewport display mode that incorporates the best things that I think about when I see the rendered mode or Arctic mode here in a minute, along with some of the technical, some of the best parts of the technical mode, like drawing edges and drawing intersections and creating some line weights around silhouettes and things like that, okay? So let's just take a look at these. So we went wireframe, shaded, rendered. Ghosted is kind of like shaded, except you can slightly see through the surfaces, so you can start to get a sense of what's behind. That can be helpful when you're just simply modeling. You don't want everything to be occluded visually, but you want to be able to sort of see through things. X-ray is like the extreme version of that. Sometimes it's helpful, other times it looks really busy. Technical gives you just what you would think, just the edges, right? And even hidden lines at the moment, right, as dashed lines, different line type. Artistic, does something crazy. I think it gives you edges. But then it also gives you like this background that looks almost like has a tooth or texture to it, like a watercolor paper or something. Let's see what it looks like here. Yeah. I'm not overly fond of this, but it does give you some soft shadows and shading. There's pen, similar. Monochrome. That's giving us some things. It's not telling us where intersections are. Right? Have you guys noticed that when I have surfaces intersecting each other, it's not drawing those intersections or edges where they would be? That really drives me crazy. You know, because I'm a psychopath. All right, Arctic. Arctic mode looks a lot like rendered, doesn't it? Just a little brighter, I think. And then of course we have ray trace. Let's see what happens when I do ray trace. All right, it's going to give me something that looks flatter. Um, and maybe I don't even have a ground surface on for ray trace. Ray trace is kind of a dud, in my opinion. So I'm going to go back to rendered just for a moment. All right, look at that. Rendered looks so good. But I almost kind of like to have rendered and technical, right? Which is interesting. It actually does draw the edges through intersections and it has all these edges, right? I'm going to try to make a display mode that sort of combines the best of both worlds, right? You can make your own display modes. And in fact, I know it's funny because we were just Strain and I, we had our students over to LA at one point, and we visited one of the firms we visited was Shubin Donaldson over in Santa Barbara. And they spend a lot of time making their own display modes in Rhino just for the sort of interesting representation that they generate during the design process. So let me just turn this back to something that's a little less heavy. I'll go with ghosted again. All right. So Melanie, this is going to be a little different for you than it is for the rest of us that are using Windows Rhino for Windows. But you want to go to the same place where you find options. So in this case, in the Windows side, it's tools, pull down, and options down at the bottom of the menu. Okay. For you, Melanie, it'll probably be up here in the taskbar where it says Rhino. You'll be able to see settings or preferences. I can't remember what it's called, or maybe it's options. Okay.
Yeah, I see it. I found it.
Good. And you should have, I believe, you should be able to find view or display modes or something like that. There should be an option for display modes, right? So you'll see all of the current display modes here. Wireframe, shaded, rendered. We just went through all of these, right? Wireframe, shaded, rendered, ghosted, X-ray, technical, artistic, pen, monochrome, Arctic, ray trace. Some of them are better than others, right? And I think that's also subjective. We all each have our own opinions on certain aesthetics, I would assume. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to technical, or let me go back to display modes, right? And I'm going to I see this list over here. I'm just going to select technical. I'm going to say make a copy of technical. Oh, yeah. So now you can see in our list over here, we have everything that we had before. And now we have something also called copy of technical. I'm going to rename this, and then we have all the settings over here for it. And we can go through all the settings and start to tweak and change things all over the place. So for display mode options, instead of the name copy of technical, I'm just going to call this AAE 767 demo, because that's what it is for me. You know, for you, you can call it whatever you want, right? For background, it says use, oh, sorry, let's see. Viewport settings. Okay, here we go. And then we can start to go through some of these settings. And I'm going to go through these settings one by one. I'm recording this. So let's just take a look. It says background, use application settings. I don't want to use application settings. I want to use a solid color. I'm going to make that solid color, not gray, but white. Okay. Ground plane settings, custom. I'm going to say use render settings. So if we use our render settings and we have something like have a ground plane on, then that's great. And if not, then we can always turn that off. Shade settings, right? So right now it's not shading anything. So I'm going to say, click that and say shade objects. Okay. Now it's really interesting, right? I might just go ahead and hit OK just for the moment. And the reason I'm going to do that is so now I can go back to my viewport. I'm just going to get rid of these menus real quick. I'm going to move this over to the side. I'm going to change this to the new one that we just made, right? So now when I go to this viewport label, it has all the same options plus the new one that we just created, right? So I'm going to change this to A767 demo. So as we start to, I go back and start changing settings. As I do so, we'll see the real-time preview of it, which can be very helpful, I think. All right, so here we go. Back to 767 demo. I have, now as I turn these things on or off, I can sort of see what they're doing, right? Which I think is kind of helpful. Instead of, let's see, standard shading, I might just use that. Color and material usage. I'm going to say rendering material. Let's see. I don't want flat shading. Let's see, rendering material, single color for all objects. I'll do single color for all objects right now, and I'll just pick that white. Okay. By default, it has a glossy set to 50 and transparency set to 0. All right. Now we might come back to this here in a bit. In fact, it's probably good bet that we'll come back to this visibility of what we're showing and what we're not showing. Use advanced GPU lighting and ambient. Yes, I'm going to turn that on. Okay. I'm going to go to the next part of the, when you drill down into this, you can start to see more things. Show grid, no. Show grid axes, no. I'm just going to leave this the way it appears right now. I'm going to go to shadows. I'm going to turn shadows on. Here we go. Now we're getting there. We're getting closer, aren't we? Shadows ignore user-defined clipping planes. And I think I'm just going to use the defaults here. I'm just going to make sure I have shadows turned on, right? So that way I start to get that soft shadow goodness from render mode. Go to other settings. You notice I skipped objects. We'll come back to that here in a minute and take a look at that. And I'm just going to leave that. I'm going to go back to the beginning. Shade objects, flat shading, color and material usage, custom material for all objects. Let's see. You can use objects display color. Why not? Or maybe not. Maybe I'll set this to white. Yeah. It doesn't appear to be doing anything, what I just did there. But oftentimes what I'll do is I'll say revert to render settings if I need to, or if I want to make my own custom material, I can. I'll just leave that. I think I'll just leave that back at rendering material. All right, sorry about that. I know this can be confusing, but that's why I set the viewport to be this mode. So as I start to change settings, I can see if it makes a difference or not. If it's a positive difference or a negative difference, if it's negative, I can sort of change things back. And standard shading, okay, I'll just use that. Back face settings, same as front face settings. You don't have to worry about that. Okay. So now we can also say, do we want to show any lines or curves that we've drawn? We can toggle those on and off. Do we want to show hidden lines? We can toggle those on and off. Do we want to show edges? We can toggle those on and off. But do we want to show the silhouettes? The silhouette edges, in other words, the outline of this thing against the white background. Do we want to show intersections, right? We toggle those off, then we won't have those, but I want those on. I purposely want those on because I want edges drawn, just like a drawing, where these things actually intersect each other, like right here or right here, where this surface protrudes to the other one. Okay. So it looks like that looks okay. And now one last thing, I'm gonna go to the objects. All right, you can see that if I just select the objects without drilling down through the caret to reveal more types of objects, I'll get something very generic. So I'm gonna go and drill down this caret. That reveals a number of different object types: points, curves, lines, clipping planes, that I can then begin to drill and say, okay, here's how I want points to display. Here's how I want curves or lines or clipping planes to display. Okay. We'll talk about clipping planes when we start talking about cutting sections and things like that. So you don't have to worry about clipping planes at the moment. I'm not really worried about points because I don't have any. I'm going to go to curves. I don't have anything there. Lines, hidden line, edge lines, silhouette lines, and intersection lines. I can set these to all be black. And I can also set their line weights. Right, so silhouette lines, typically what we do is we look at the silhouette and we beef that up. You know, we give a sort of, what I mean by line weight is the sort of width or visual weight of each line or edge. Typically, we beef up the silhouette, so I'll change that to 3 and let's see what that does, right? Okay, so that did something. Intersection lines, we can always tone down. Edge lines, we can, you know, again, we can sort of adjust these things. 3 seems a bit extreme. I'm just going to change that to 2, just so it just ever so slightly does these things. Hidden lines, again, we can always, we have them turned off, but we could always give them some sort of line weight here if we ever want to turn them on. That's kind of up to you. It looks like it's either 0, 1, or 2. Or you know, it looks like it's just whole numbers. It's not. Yeah, okay. What happens if we beef up edges to 2, intersection lines to 2, and these to 3? Anyway, you can sort of go through and make some decisions on your own on what you think looks best. I'm going to tone these down to 1, this one to 2, that one to 1. All right, and I can hit OK. All right. Yeah, so that's me making my own display mode, right? And I've named it. In this case, I've just named it after this course in the demo, so I remember what it is next time I play around with this, you know, on Tuesday or whatever. Now I can go back through and again change my symmetric. There we go. Perfect. That's beautiful. Let's see here. You wanna move forward? Yeah, you ready for a little more? What I'm going to do is I'm going to propose that we bring these images out. We save these images as JPEGs or PNGs. We bring them into Illustrator, and then I'll give you some Illustrator files with some silhouettes of humans and trees, and you can start to populate these things with some silhouettes. All right. So I'll show you how to do that, and then I'll give those assets to you that you can use as Illustrator files on Canvas towards the end of class today. Okay, all right. So at one point in time, we would do a make 2D and actually get a set of lines and curves for all these edges. And then we would bring those two things together, the image of the rendering and all of the lines and curves into Illustrator, composite them together, and then start to go through one by one and start changing line weights. I don't find a strong need to do that anymore. I mean, messing around the display modes is kind of nice and easy way of dealing with that. Let me just go back through here and see if there's a way to change. I'm not quite satisfied. This looks a little gray to me. I kind of want something. Well, maybe I'm just being silly. Yeah, I am. I'll just leave it the way it is. Okay, I'm gonna hit OK again. All right. Now you'll have 5 different sort of models to sort of export out, right? I'm just going to take the 4 different views of this one. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom out just a smidge. The reason I'm zooming out is because I noticed that it's casting just a little bit of soft shadow on a hypothetical, fictional white ground plane, right? And if I have these soft shadows too close to the edge, then when I make an image, you'll actually see it cut off. And I want these to sort of float in a field of a white page. All right. So that's something that frustratingly happens sometimes. You're like, oh man, I don't want to have to go back into Rhino and reshift everything and redo everything. There are ways in Photoshop you can bring that in and use a feathered delete tool and or a white brush that's diffuse around the edges and start to reshape, recontour the curve so there's not a hard break. But I'm just going to anticipate that right now and try to make sure that that's fixed. I'm going to just zoom out just a bit in holding the shift key, use my right mouse button and sort of just pan everything up just slightly. All right. And I'm going to go to view, pull down, capture to file. Now, I'm not exactly sure where this exists on the Mac version, Melanie. But we can Google it if you can't find it on your own.
Yeah, I'll just look it up
Okay.
and see.
As I say, we can Google it here at once we finish this demonstration. View, pull down, capture to file. All right. And we're going to get several different options here. One, do I want this grid to show? Do I want to, do I want a transparent background? I'm going to click yes to transparent background. Right. What that means is that I'll even have these shadows, but they're an alpha, they're translucent, and I'm not going to have a white background at all. In fact, I can change the background on my page, and I won't have a sort of white box around my image. All right. So I'm going to use the transparent background. The resolution right now is set to whatever the size of my viewport is on my window screen. I could change that. In fact, if I wanted to be very particular, I can go through, I can set a custom one and specify the width and height my own. If I say viewport, but then I say scale, and I want to scale it up to be twice as large, in other words, I want something higher resolution, I can do that here. So you can see right now my viewport is currently 2,918 pixels wide by 1618 tall. You can see I have a lot of white space here. But if I change the scale to 2, right, then you can see that the resolution now will be 5836 by 3236. So we double these. Now you have to be careful because when you double the width and double the height, you're basically quadrupling, right? You're multiplying things by 4. The amount of pixels that you have that has to sort of calculate and resolve when it produces this PNG file that we're going to produce. And it exponentially grows, right? So it's always going to be the square of this scale. So if we go 3 times one direction and the other 3 times in the other direction, we're going to have 9 times as much area. 4 times 4 is 16. So you're always looking at that scale factor, squaring it. And that's how much extra time and information it's going to need. I'm going to go ahead and scale it by 2. I'm going to go ahead and say, okay. And then the last thing it's going to ask me is, where do I want to save it? What do I want to name it? And what file type do I want? JPEG will doesn't preserve those transparency, those alpha channels for the transparent background. So I want to set this to PNG. If I set it to TIFF, I think it'll preserve the background, the transparent background, but it'll be a huge file. PNG, I think, is lossless, but it's a little more compact and it's also web compatible. So let me see here. I'm just going to put this on my desktop, my Mac desktop, and I'll call this axon 01.png. All right. And what you'll notice is that it's not actually responding at the moment. It's thinking. Okay. In fact, you can see the spinning wheel. The command line will tell you when it's done actually producing that file. And if I'd kept the scale at 1, that wouldn't take hardly any time. But since I doubled things, right, so I had 4 times as large of a file, right? Now you can see, okay, image successfully saved as blah, blah, blah /axon001.png. All right. So now I'm just going to do the same thing, and I'm just going to go through. In this case, I'm going to pick a different one. I'll zoom out just slightly like I did before, pan it upwards, just like I did before, and perform the same task, right? View, capture to file. Transparent background, scale is set to 2. That's convenient. So all of the parameters remain the same. And I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And I'm just going to select the axon 01 to get that file name and change the 01 to 02 and hit save. All right. I'm going to do this 2 more times. I know, sorry, it seems a bit extreme to do this, but I want 4. I'm going to grid a 2x2 grid for me. And I'll show you guys some Illustrator really quickly. Just taking a second here. Sometime today. There we are. Looks like it's done. Okay, perfect. I don't know why my yeah, something's not set up with, I think, parallels working as optimally as it could. I wonder if it's like perpetually on battery saver mode instead of high performance mode or something, but I'll double check that later. Okay, so again, I'm just going to make sure that I get a have enough down here at the bottom to prevent so that the shadows can feather away to white. Let's see, capture to file. Yep. Hit OK. Name this one axon 03. And again, we wait for about 30 seconds. So over the weekend, if you guys can actually do this, get these into Illustrator, line them up in a grid or a line, and then begin to populate them with humans and maybe some trees. That'd be awesome. So I'll go through that here in just a minute. Looks like it's done. Let's see here. Set view, isometric. Last but not least, the southwest. Zoom out just a bit. Move this up just a bit. I'm making sure I'm holding the shift key I'm panning. I'm just moving things rather than actually tilting anything and changing my axon. So these will always be 30-30. They'll be consistent in that regard. View, capture to file. Still bugs me that I see these edges sort of bleeding through, but you can only do so much in a short amount of time. Hit OK and name this bad boy axon04.png. All right. Just a couple more seconds and it should be done. Then I'll probably just let Windows shut down and I'll do some work in Illustrator with you. No, it's close. There we go. All right. Save. Sure, why not? Oh, I'll name this 2024. Oh yeah, look at that. All right. No, I don't want to install an update right now. Come on. Ah. The worst is when Rhino wants to install an update, the Autodesk thing comes up and says, hey, you're due for an update. And then Windows also wants to run an update when you're shutting down, and he says, don't reboot your computer yet or shut it off. Which happens, like the trifecta, right? Let's see here. Well, that's working. I'm going to go ahead and get Adobe Illustrator opening up here. All right, parallels. We're done with you for right now. So you can see here on my desktop, and maybe you can see my desktop is quite messy. I have axon 01, 02, 03, 04. They're PNG files. And let me go ahead and open this up in Illustrator if it ever opens. Sometime today. Half my life is just sitting around waiting for the computer to do my work for me. It's not a bad position to be in, but sometimes it can be frustrating. You lose some agency there, don't you? Let's see. So application not responding. What's going on here? It's kind of weird. Wonder if I filled up my hard drive or something. And all right, I'm just going to start a new thing here. So I have Illustrator. I'm just going to go File, New, and 24 by 48 seems a bit extreme. 8.5 by 11. That sounds better. All right. I'm going to go with landscape. So 11 inches wide, 8.5 parts tall. I'll just leave it at RGB. I don't really care at the moment. We're not going to be printing these at any kind of high resolution. Sure. I'll just hit create. But what Illustrator will let us do is compose things together, as well as compose any vector information that we need. Let's see here. As we wait and wait and wait. All right, here we go. So first things first, I can go ahead and use the file and place. That's how I can place images into Illustrator. Place graphics. Here we go. Here's my 4 axons. I'll go ahead and place those. These might be ridiculously large. Indeed, they are. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom out as much as I can. Yeah. All right. So you can see here's my 8.5 by 11. Here are my images. I'm going to go ahead and select them all at once. Sorry, the zoom interface conflicts with my Adobe interface because I have a lot of options up here and I have things selected. So first and foremost, I'm just going to resize these things. You can see that right now they're a width of 82 and almost 1/2 inches wide by 45, almost 46 inches tall, which is kind of ridiculous. I have this right now. I'm constraining the width and height so that if I change one, it'll change the other proportionally. And I'll just make sure that these are like 6 inches wide by whatever tall. Okay, there we go. Now they all fit on the screen. The way I was zooming in and out, I know this is a huge crash course, is by using I'm on the Mac, so I'm using Command key. That's interchangeable with Control key if you're using a Windows machine, but I can use Command plus or Command minus to zoom in or zoom out. Command 0 will fit everything to my screen. All right. So now I have these and I can begin to place them and arrange them in a grid. You can see actually that as I range 1, it'll try to sort of smart track and center things up for me, which is kind of handy. Yeah, perfect. So now I have a grid. So now I can make basically a PDF, right, with the results from Rhino. Anybody can sort of take a look at them and open them up and view them on their phones, on their laptops, whatever. So let me go ahead and just save this really quickly before we go on to the next step. I'll just call this axons demo 01. Save that. Okay. As an Illustrator file, .ai file. I'll just leave this as is. Yeah. Come on. Okay. Now I'm going to open up a different set of Illustrator files that already have some silhouettes. And again, I'll make these available to you on Canvas as well, or email them to you in your case, Solly. So what I'm going to do is hit File Open. And I believe I'm going to go to Documents and go to, where is he? Entourage. There we go. And I'm even going to turn this into a list so I can see what kind. Here we go. All right, so I have common people, AI, common people, groups of people, people silhouettes, silhouettes trees, in section and elevation, silhouette trees. There's a lot of stuff here. Trees and plan, that seems less interesting to me. These three seem to be all the same. And then there's this one and this one. So let me go ahead and I'll just try these to see which ones are the best. Actually, this looks like it's just a copy of that one. And I'll hit open. All right, so here we have people, silhouettes. I'm not sure what, like, don't be a weirdo and do that in public, but, or, practice your ninja skills or whatever. But there are folks walking. And in fact, we can, in Illustrator, we can change and have a solid fill or just change and have an outline, right? So I'll show a few of these things in a moment, but from here, what we can do is we can copy, Command C, and then paste these folks into our scenes, all right? So let's see, we have groups of people, we have common people. There we go. La, la, la. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take these first couple of rows and copy and paste them into my file over here. I'll just drag them off to the side so they don't get in the way. When I have them all selected, I can then scale them all at once to try to get them to the right scale, right? It's really important. I would recommend scaling everything, all of your people at the same time, so they're all the same size, rather than have to do it individually after the fact, right? But what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale them to particular size, and then I can begin to scatter them around however I need to, right? So I can begin to add them here, there, or anywhere. You can place her up here, can place these folks down here, someone out there. No, maybe someone over here. Let's do that. They're all going to be the same size since they're all on axon, right? But you're just basically trying to give a sense of scale. What scale is this thing at? And we can immediately relate to the human figure. When we see that, we go, okay, we know how tall a person typically is, on average. And we go from there. You can also begin to suggest program, like activities, like how a space might be used. Although, it's kind of limited when you're just looking at it here and you only have a certain number of folks. Let's have these two people sort of standing next to each other talking or something. All right. And the other thing I would say is don't have the same three people in each one. It starts to look repetitive. So that it really does with trees. We'll talk about that in a minute. All right, look at that. We'll have some folks here. Someone talking on their phone, standing there. There's someone else. You can make up your own scenarios if you'd like, Put somebody back there. Still feel like something is needed. Someone's needed right there, maybe. That looks kind of goofy, doesn't it? Let's get rid of that guy. That's better. Now, one other thing I'll mention is that, these are just true black silhouettes. They really kind of stand out. They're really kind of dark compared to the rest of the thing. And I don't want them to be like they kind of dominate a little bit here visually. So I might select all of these one more time. Maybe I'll just play around with them here. And I could either change their fill color to something like a lighter gray, or I could change their opacity up here and turn them so that they're slightly see-through, right? So maybe I change their opacity to 50%. And now maybe they don't stick out so much, but they're there and you can still see the architecture behind them as well a little bit, right? So I'll do the same thing with these over here. Turn their opacity down to 50% or so. And I'll do, last but not least, I'll do the same thing with these over here. Yeah, okay. 50. All right. Now I can begin to continue to place these folks around, like over here and over here as well, right? And we can do the same thing with trees. Let's see, these people silhouettes, some of them are useful, some of them, holding a surfboard or doing yoga or something kind of weird. Although, I mean, you could honestly see a pavilion like this. Maybe somebody is doing yoga up here. I don't know, whatever. But I'll make a couple of these available to you. The groups of people, yeah, I'll go ahead and make these things available to you. So really quickly, this begins to suggest a few things, right? One is that when it comes to Illustrator and we're using graphics like this, they're vector graphics. In other words, we can scale them up and down, but really all we have is a set of lines and curves that can scale without pixelating. And then we can also fill the insides as we want. Those are vector graphics. The more you zoom in, the more you can see that it's really just literally a set of lines and curves, paths, what they call it in Illustrator. And so when you go over here to these tools, they look kind of similar to Rhino, right? If you've never picked up Illustrator before. We have a cursor, and then we have some things where we can draw and then things where we can modify the things that we drew. But down here we have two color swatches. One is a fill and one is the outline, or what they call stroke, right? So this is an example of one where the stroke is set to black and the fill is set to white. You can see, let me see here. Arrange, bring to front. That indeed, if I move this over another graphic, right, there's a white fill and a black background. I could change any of these by simply clicking and setting one of them to the foreground and then giving it a different color, or even setting it so that there's no color, right? So let me just say black stroke, but the fill I'm going to set to transparent. Now I can see through. And then last but not least, we talked about line weight in Rhino, but there's also line weights in Illustrator. You can see this is quite a heavy line weight, what they call stroke weight in Illustrator. Oftentimes you'll find these settings along the right-hand side here. If you don't see them, all the boxes that you need, and there's more here than you can shake a stick at, as we used to say back in the Midwest where I grew up. You can turn something on. So when we're talking about stroke, we can have that turned on. You can see that it's actually right here embedded in this little toolbar over here and docked on the side. But here I can say stroke weight of, say, make it like 0.25, right? I could also change the type of line it is. I could change it to a dash line if I wanted to. Should be kind of weird at this scale, etc. Right? So in other words, if I see something here that's outlined, I can change it over here. I can say, let's change it so that's a black silhouette. Then of course I could always change the opacity down to 50 if I wanted to. Okay. As you copy and paste things in and out, right? One thing I didn't really mention at the very beginning, but it can be very handy, is that we still have layers in Illustrator, just like we do in Rhino. Okay. So you can put things on different layers, and then the other thing I would say is that when you think about layers and you think about like some things are on top of other things, it's like, again, thinking about the analogy or the sort of metaphor of trace paper, right? So a layer that's up higher on the list of layers will be a layer of trace paper on top of the things below it, right? So we can sort of switch the sequencing of these things and the sort of depth of these, what's over top of another thing, what's an overlay, what's an underlay, in other words, right? If you want to do that at the object level, you can just simply click it or right click on it and then go to arrange. You could say, bring this up to the front or send this to the back, right? And so if I did that, check this out, for instance. Let me try to find a good example for why I would do that. Let me find an example here. I'm going to take this person. Let's say I'm looking at it at this scale, and I'm putting this person behind so that this person is actually back behind this, right? So what I would probably do is I could right click on this and say arrange and send to back. or I could right click on the image and say arrange, bring to front, right? To sort of better position these things so they actually look like they belong. Let me send this to back really quickly so I can actually select this silhouette, right? And then send her back, send to back, right? So that's how you can begin to occlude people really quickly. There are some situations where, you know, there might be up front here, but occluded from something below. If you run into that, let me know on Monday or Tuesday, sorry, when we next meet. We can talk a little more about Illustrator. This was a really quick crash course in Illustrator, okay? What I am asking you is to try. On Tuesday, we'll review these. And then hopefully by the end of Tuesday, I'll be asking you like by the end of Tuesday, or maybe by the beginning of Wednesday's class, to then submit a PDF of these axons from Illustrator with some people and trees, okay? Let me just show you what the tree files look like before. I'll make these available to you on Canvas here. I have an entourage folder just full of things like this. Let's see if this will give me an actual preview. Of course it won't. Tree silhouettes. That's just a copy, so I'll open this one up. This is 21.9 megabytes. Holy moly. I'll go ahead and open these four and let's see what legacy artboard. I don't know. What does that mean? All right, so here we have some trees. Here we have some trees. This looks goofy. All right, that's not good. People silhouettes, tree silhouettes, trees AI. Are these the same? I'll probably give you both of these then. So what you can see here from these is that we have just the stroke or outline drawn. So in this case, I'm going to say no stroke. And then I'm going to go to the fill and I'm going to go to black. Let's see what we get here. Ah, I see. Yeah, so this is a junky file because we have a bunch of closed things that this is what happens when you try to set a fill color, but the shape isn't closed. It's trying to figure out what's inside and what's outside, and it's having a really difficult time doing that, isn't it? Okay, so we just won't even use that one. We'll use this one. This looks like it has maybe a couple of trees you might find, you know, more in the Las Vegas area anyway. Okay, so once again, maybe I'll just pick a few here to copy and paste in to where we're working the axons demo file. I'll drag them off to the side just long enough to turn their opacity down to 50 because we definitely don't want these to be really large, dark blobs. And then also maybe to scale them a bit. Some of these might be bigger or taller than others. We can always scale further as appropriate as you feel is appropriate. All right. So in this case, I would want to send this to the back. Let's arrange this and send it to the back. Right. At least I thought that's what I was doing. Send to back. I'm not sure why I'm seeing it through this. Okay. Let me just select this and say arrange, bring to front. Huh. Send this to back. But I want this to be sent to back. Oh, I wonder if this is on a different layer. In fact, yeah, it did. So for whatever reason, it brought these things on different layers. So what I want to do is I'm going to move this up in the layer sequence, right? So this is the layer with everything else that I had in it, and then these are layers of just trees, right? Okay, that's why it wasn't making a difference when I was sending things up and back and forward. Of course. Now, if I have something like, let's say this tree in the foreground, then what I want to do is I want to bring that layer into the foreground, right? You might try to avoid hiding too much of your architecture though, right? We really want to see this. This person's grossly out of scale. Let me send it back. Get rid of that person. Maybe put this tree back here and send it all the way back. All right. Same thing with this one. I might just add some foliage peeking out behind it. You can do your, maybe I'm dating myself here. You can do your best Bob Ross imitation, put in a tree, give that tree a little friend, sort of thing. This is a smaller tree. Maybe I will put this one in the foreground, right? But anyway, it's kind of up to your discretion, right? And sometimes things are a little more successful than others, right? And honestly, you won't know what things look like till you try them, right? My job is then, we can talk through them on Tuesday, see where everybody's at, and then have you submit them and next week, right? So your goal for next Tuesday is to, if you can, have these things ready to submit. But I completely understand if you run into some snags, particularly if it's the first time you've ever used Illustrator. And at least two of you, maybe three, but two of you, this is probably the first time. So I completely understand that, and we'll go at the pace we need to. If that's not the case, if that's the case, then on Tuesday we'll start off by simply troubleshooting things, redemonstrating some things in Illustrator. Okay, and these instructions are at the very end of the recording because I'm still recording. So if you need to refer back to them, but again, you can always email me if you have any quick questions over the weekend. All right. It's just gonna bug me if I don't try to finish this. I mean, golly, I gotta try my best here. There's some people.
When
These
we do
things.
ours, we're putting them in their own like page, right? Not like grid how you did it. Because we have 5, right?
Yeah, so here's my thought on that. I leave that up to you, but you might
Okay.
just do each one on its own page. And
Okay.
then again, I only had one model, so I did 4 views of one
Mhm.
model. You don't have to do all 4 views of each model. What I would say
Okay.
is look and decide northeast, northwest,
Which
southeast,
perspective?
southwest, which one you think
Okay.
is the most interesting,
Okay.
and then go with that one.
Okay.
All right. So you'll have 5 axon drawings, 5-page PDF. I saved this natively in Illustrator as an AI file, but I can always go to File and say Save As and save as a PDF, right? And that's what I would ask for you to submit or be ready to submit on Tuesday. By Tuesday's class, I'll actually have an assignment up that gives you a mechanism to actually submit things, and they'll probably be officially due by Wednesday morning before class time. Okay, so I'll give you a little more time to sort of put the finishing touches on things if you need it. Okay, but try your best over the weekend. And again, if you have any quick needs over the weekend, you can always email me. And if you dedicated some time over the weekend to sort of try to get these things done, and you're stuck, I could always try to just simply meet you over Zoom and get you unstuck really quickly. That's the other part of my job. Get you unstuck when you're stuck, right? Get you over the hump of the sometimes steep, sometimes shallow learning curves that happen when we're learning all these new tools all at once. Okay. So any quick questions before we break for the day, for the week?
I wanted to show you what I did on Rhino. I feel like I messed up on something, but I don't know how or when or where.
Okay.
I tried to fix my shared thing, so hopefully it works.
All righty.
If
Let me stop sharing and stop recording.
okay.
And then I will, yeah, let me just do that. Stop share, stop record.